Hello everybody. So ever since Superman and Lois debuted, and I absolutely loved it, you can check out the 2 videos I made about it up there, I just wanted to see what the rest of the Arrowverse was like. What is this giant DC TV show universe that's been going on for 10 years? What is it? Why is it sometimes praised for being amazing and sometimes very much trashed on as being very terrible at times? Especially in the last few years. So, I decided I wanted to go back to the beginning, to the show that started it all, Arrow, and start my journey through the Arrowverse. And so far, I am 2 seasons into Arrow, and overall, I enjoyed it. I think it's a really great show, but I do have some problems with it. So, without further ado, let's get into my thoughts on the first 2 seasons of Arrow. So my overall thoughts on the first 2 seasons of Arrow is that it is a very good show. I think that the action is very well done. I think the plot twists are mostly successful. Of course, since it is, a TV show that's working on a TV budget that came out like 10 years ago, some of the effects aren't great. Some things kind of look very much like a set at times, but other times it looks realistic, probably because, when it looks realistic, it's probably because it is realistic and they filmed it on location, whereas when it looks fake, they probably actually filmed it on a set. So sometimes you can kind of tell it's a set, and also just, there's some explosions throughout it that just kind of, look like a TV budget from 10 years ago. So, that's just a minor complaint that just kind of goes with just the technology that they had at the time. So, I think overall, I think it was very good. I think most of the effects were pretty good, and the action was very well done. I think that the characters are very interesting. They all have some different, characteristics to them that kind of make them stand out, and, just have a certain thing about them that just makes each of them interesting. I like how in season 2 they set up the Flash, which I'm going to get into soon. Probably, after filming this video, I'll start watching the Flash, the first season of it, and I'll look at my thoughts on that. And so I'm glad that they kind of set that up in season 2 of Arrow. They had Barry Allen come in, and I wasn't expecting to have. I was expecting that he was going to already have his powers, but no, instead they show him getting his powers and going into a coma for the rest of it. So I thought that was very interesting, the way they introduced Barry Allen, set up the Flash. I think that the 2 big villains in the 2 seasons, Malcolm Merlyn in season 1 and Slade Wilson in season 2, I think that they were both very good. They both had understandable motives, and like Malcolm Merlyn was interesting because he was another archer, whereas most of the other people that Oliver has fought weren't other archers. So that was an interesting thing there, and also just like that it's Malcolm Merlyn, just his whole how he like ties into it all. Having him be Tommy's father and now Thea's father, apparently. I think that's his like involvement in all the characters made him an interesting villain there. And then Slade Wilson, obviously, having the Mirakuru, made him interesting, being like very strong and stuff, but also having it like mess with his mind with losing Shadow, and that causing him to go crazy and wanting to have revenge on Oliver because he thinks that Oliver caused it, which he kind of did. So I think that made Slade Wilson interesting. Just the strategy, how he really planned everything out very well throughout it, where he seemed to always stay one step ahead of Oliver throughout it. So I think he was a very interesting villain. Malcolm Merlyn was an interesting villain, and even the smaller, kind of one-off episode villains. I think most of them were pretty good. They were kind of hit or miss. There were some of them that were like really great, like I think the Huntress or Helena, Oliver's crazy ex-girlfriend. I think she's an interesting villain, but then there's some others. I don't even know. That just shows that I can't even think of all of the villains that were in the show. So, there were some not very memorable, not very great, but there were others that were really good and interesting. And so, yeah, the villains were kind of hit or miss, for the smaller ones. And so, I think just my overall thoughts on the show is that it kept my interest. I think this was a good, it was a good first 2 seasons of the show. I think they developed a lot of interesting things throughout it. There was a lot of cool twists, and it kept my interest, and I've been really enjoying it. I'm a little bit nervous because I have heard that it doesn't get, it's not really that great after it doesn't get, kind of goes downhill after a while, but it's still very good. I think I've heard the first 2 seasons are good. I agree. I think they're amazing. And yeah, I really enjoyed the first 2 seasons of Arrow, but I do have some problems with it. It's just kind of, there's issues that just kind of came up while watching it that I just think, didn't severely impact my enjoyment of the show. It's just kind of like, there's certain things that just didn't work as well as I think that the creators wanted it to. Like, I think the flashbacks of Oliver on the island or occasionally stuff before the island, for a few of the episodes, I think the flashbacks didn't really work, there were a few times where it didn't work as well. Like, it was kind of hit or miss. Like, sometimes the flashbacks worked very well as, like, a really interesting tool that, an interesting storytelling tool for the show, but I think other times it just kind of felt like it was competing with the present day stuff, and it was, it was kind of like, I think they haven't really perfected how they're using flashbacks, especially because they're, the present day stuff is supposed to be taking place after the 5 years, but they're trying to develop, different things that happen throughout the 5 years, so it makes it so it's kind of like, as of, season 1, Oliver has experienced all 5 years. We haven't seen the 5 years yet, but he's experienced all 5 years, so it's kind of weird, because I'm sure, because there's a few moments where I feel like, you could tell that they were writing things parallel to each other, like when Oliver reveals that there's a cure for the Mirror I think that's a big moment where I feel like the flashbacks kind of hurt that moment because it's kind of like, you want for the flashbacks to have the reveal of the cure be a big moment, but it doesn't make sense for him to have not said that earlier in present day, so it's just kind of a weird thing there where they wanted to have the big reveal in the present day, but I mean the big reveal in in both timelines, in both the flashback and the present day, but it didn't really work all that well because again it doesn't make sense for him to not have said it yet. And also another big moment that I think didn't, that was kind of clunky because the flashbacks was Slade Wilson, when Slade Wilson was revealed to be alive in present day. I think that because they kill him with the Mirror, and then an episode later, 1 or 2 episodes later, I don't remember which, but like, 1 or 2 episodes later, he shows back in present day, and they have to go back to the flashback to show him, coming back to life and going out and seeing Shadow dead. And so, I think that was a moment that was kind of like, they wanted this big reveal in the present day of, oh, Slade Wilson is alive, but to do that they had to kill him for a second in the flashback, and so, I don't think it worked all that well. I think also because in that episode they also have uh, Oliver hallucinates seeing him, and so because the whole thing in that episode is he's hallucinating seeing people who have died because of him, and Slade Wilson is one of them. I guess at the time he thought Slade Wilson was dead. I don't know. It's just a weird clunky thing that I didn't think worked all that well. Especially watching it for the first time. I think maybe it works a little bit better seeing what happened, but I think seeing at the time of watching it just is kind of a weird thing. So I don't think that worked nearly as well as they wanted it to. Just the flashbacks, I think, in general, just the flashbacks were kind of hit or miss. Another thing with Slade Wilson is the thing with him being in love with Shadow. I don't think that worked. I mean, it worked as a good motivation for him to, for his actions, but I think, the reveal of him being in love with her just felt like it came out of nowhere. I guess they were kind of setting it up earlier with him, kind of looking like he was being jealous of Oliver and her, but it seemed more like it was he didn't want Oliver getting attached to her because, that could make him vulnerable to a bad guy trying to manipulate him. So, I thought that was what was happening, but then it turned out that it was because he was in love with her. So I feel like that just kind of came out of nowhere. That wasn't how I interpreted what was happening. It probably that was probably what they were trying to imply. I just didn't get that from it. So I felt like that kind of came out of nowhere, him being in love with her. But once it was established, I think that it was a nice parallel to Roy and Thea, because there's always the thing with Slade Wilson hallucinating seeing Shadow, and when Roy was going crazy for the Mirakuru, he was hallucinating seeing Thea. So I think it worked as a nice parallel between between the two relationships there. But yeah, so just basically, I just think there's a few things with the flashbacks being used that just didn't work that well. Other times it was good. Sometimes it didn't work that well. Another thing that I think didn't work all that well was the characters' overreactions to things, overly emotional reactions to things. It wasn't terrible, and given the circumstances, it makes sense that these characters are gonna have some emotional baggage and not react the way a normal person would to certain things, with just taking into account all that happened. There's a bunch of stuff that happens in the show that kind of does warrant some of the strange emotional reactions to things. So I'll say it's not overly unrealistic that these characters would react that way, but it just feels like, as an audience member, I don't feel like the characters have earned that emotional reaction, if that makes sense. I feel like, especially in the first season, and the beginning of the first season, when Thea is acting kind of very emotionally to Oliver coming back, and it makes sense in light of the situation, that her brother was dead for 5 years and then came back. It's kind of a traumatic experience. But I think that since we're just kind of thrown into the middle of it, we're just oh, he was gone for 5 years, now we're seeing the aftermath. It doesn't feel like the characters, like I said, have earned that reaction in the audience perspective. Obviously, in the world of the show, they have earned the right to react that way, but I think the audience is being thrown into the middle of that. It's just kind of weird. Plus, I do think that they are acting a little bit too much of things, even considering the circumstances, but I don't know. I just think that even though it is understandable in the world of the show, it just doesn't, again, just doesn't feel earned from the audience perspective. One example of this, in, at the end of season 2, is for, the last, 6 episodes of the season, Oliver just has this severe pessimism about defeating Slade Wilson. At least once in every single of the last 6 episodes of season 2, Oliver says, I can't defeat Slade Wilson. It's impossible to defeat him. He's too powerful. I can't do it. And some other character has to go to him and say, you can do it. You are strong enough. You can do this. You've beaten all these other people. You can do this. You're going to find a way. Then, an episode later, it happens again. And it just kept getting really, really repetitive to the point where, by when it happens in the last episode, you're just like, oh my god, this has been happening 10 times already. What is happening? It's just, you're just like, Oliver, you're gonna find a way. You've been through this 10 times already in the last few days. Just stop, just calm down. It just got a bit ridiculous with the repetitiveness of it. I think that it only should have happened twice. I think it should have happened after Moira's death, which I was very surprised that happened. But I think it should have happened after Moira's death, and then at some point either before or after it. But I think it only deserved to happen 2 times instead of happening 10 times in the course of 6 episodes. That was just really ridiculous. It just got really, again, repetitive and tiring after a while. You're just like, Oliver, stop, okay? This has happened multiple times. This happened 10 times already. We're tired of it. Just get some confidence. And again, that's something that's not unrealistic to happen, but from an audience perspective, as an audience member, I don't want to be watching a character repeat the same pessimism over and over again about defeating the villain. Just do it once, realize you can do it, defeat the villain. It got tiring after a while. Another thing I'm just going to say quickly is that the couples were kind of hit or miss. I think that, there were some of them that I was very invested in, the 2 characters being together in their relationship, whereas others I was just kind of like, really? These 2? Really? So, I'm not going to go into depth in, going through all the couples and saying if I like them or not, but I will say that there are couples in the show that I very much enjoyed, and other couples that I was very much annoyed with. So, I'll just leave it at that, because I feel like I'm giving the show a lot of hate. I've been talking about a lot of problems with it, with the flashbacks and some the emotional reactions to things, and just, I've been giving it a little bit too much hate. And so, I think that I want to give it some praise, because it really is an amazing show, and so I'm going to highlight some of the amazing moments throughout it that I personally think were some of the best of the show. First, Tommy's death. I think that was very well done and very surprising. I did not expect them to kill Tommy at the end of the first season, so that was a very surprising moment there, and it had major consequences on season 2 in both Oliver's character, because he does this, changes his whole, outlook on being the Arrow, and he decides to do, the no-killing thing. So, it had major consequences on Oliver's character, and also Laurel's character, because she, becomes an alcoholic, and, all this stuff, substance abuse, and so it has a lot of, you see at the beginning of the season some of the serious, drastic effects, consequences it had on Laurel's character, and so I think that, it all goes back to Tommy's death, and I think that was just a very, very well executed scene, and yeah, I just think it was really surprising. I think it's one of the best deaths so far. Another death Moira's. Definitely did not expect that to happen, especially, you know, so, I mean, it's not really soon in the season, but, I would expect that to be in, like, the finale and not, like, 4 episodes before the finale, so that was very surprising. Also, having her find out right before, or reveal that she knows Oliver is the Arrow before, a little bit before that, that was a good moment. But going back to her death itself, I think that that was a very good way for her character to go, protecting her children, and that's kind of the theme. It's kind of Moira's episode. Even the flashback is Moira fixing Oliver's problem of getting a girl pregnant, which means that he has a 6-year-old out there somewhere. I'm hoping that comes back and that wasn't just a throwaway thing. I assume it's not. I assume it's going to come back at some point, hopefully in season 3. But yeah, if that is just a throwaway thing that just happened, I'm gonna be very disappointed. So I'm hoping that comes back up eventually. But that's just a very good way for Moira to go, protecting her children, and it's also cool how it kind of is, nice parallel to. I mean, Slade Wilson is intentionally recreating when Ivo made Oliver choose between Sarah and Shadow. So I think that was, tragic, but that was cool to see, like, that's, they recreated that scene with Moira and Thea, and Moira ends up dying. And it's cool how Oliver doesn't choose. Moira chooses for herself. She stands up, protecting Thea and Oliver, and saying, "Take me instead." So I thought that was a great moment for for Moira's character, a good way for her character to grow, and it wasn't something I expected, and so I think that was a very, very sad moment, but a very well executed moment of the show. Another big moment that I think that I want to, say that the show did a good job with is that, the reveal that Malcolm Merlyn is Thea's father. At first I was just like, really? That is completely ridiculous. Why you had to throw that in there? But I think, I think that it is a nice twist, and it's definitely going to have consequences on, moving forward in the show in season 3, because Thea went with him at the end, so, I think that's going to be very interesting to see, where that all goes. Another scene that I think was very well executed was the dinner scene in the episode Time of Death. I think that they did a good job with, like, the camera work and I think there may have been music in the background, just giving this, the tenseness, the intensity of the tenseness and the awkwardness of the moment, of the dinner. I think that it was very well executed with, you have Quentin trying to get his wife back, and, the awkwardness, because she's like, oh, I'm with somebody in Central City, and, it's kind of this awkward, tense stuff going on there, and also with Laurel finding out that Oliver and Sarah are together again. It was very well executed scene that I think perfectly, expressed the awkwardness of the situation there. And then just every single time somebody finds out that Oliver is the Arrow, I think every single moment was very well done, and they're all very different reasons and scenarios of why they find out, because you have Diggle, which is a very, when Diggle finds out, it was a very planned, very planned out thing that Oliver thought about, and he decided, alright, I'm going to tell Diggle about it, because, he could help me on the mission. So I think that, you have that there, and then you have other times where when Barry Allen finds out, and that's totally out of Oliver's hands. He's unconscious, and Felicity gets Barry to help bring Oliver back to life, and so, you have these two, there's two different ends of the spectrum of like very, very like planned out, thought out confession of being the Arrow, and then some others where it's just he's unconscious and somebody else tells somebody for him. Then when you have Roy find out, it's out of necessity to get him to focus and so they could save the city. I think that just every single time somebody found out that Oliver's the Arrow, it was very well executed. They were all very different for different reasons, and I think that they were just very well done. There are big moments in the show, and I think they treated them very much like big moments. So I definitely enjoyed anytime somebody found out that he was the Arrow, and there's certainly going to be much more of that moving forward. And so, those are my thoughts on the first 2 seasons of Arrow. I overall thoroughly enjoyed the show, even though I do have a lot of problems with it. I think that it's still very good. I think that it is something very special, and I'm excited to see the world grow to different shows and crossovers and Crisis on Infinite Earths and, all the crazy stuff that I know happens later, and all the stuff that I've heard doesn't work, and all the stuff that I've heard does work. I'm excited to see it all, and I think, comment below what is the good stuff to watch, because I've heard some stuff is like, not very great over here, like Batwoman. That's not really that great of a show. I've heard Supergirl is, isn't that great. Maybe it is good at the beginning, but isn't great at the end. I know Arrow is not that great at the end. So just comment below if you've seen all of the Arrowverse. What's good? What's bad? What's worth watching? What could I skip? Because there is a lot of it, so it would be helpful to have a bit of a guide to know what's worth watching. I have this article on what's on Netflix of just showing how to go through the Arrowverse, but I know that some of it isn't as good as others, so I would have much appreciate if you comment below what's worth watching out of it all. And also just comment below what are your thoughts on the video and of the first 2 seasons of Arrow. And please remember to give this video a like, consider subscribing, and maybe check out some of my other videos. There's some good ones over there. But until next time, with that said, that's a wrap.